Hi, and welcome to Cooking Fast and Eating Light, where I am cooking with recipes that have 5-ish ingredients or less because it's my mission to break down that barrier to healthy eating. Welcome, my name is Judy Matusky and I am a registered and licensed dietitian, and I'm also a culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. So welcome to all of you that are joining me live here in my kitchen, and to anyone who's going to watch this video on the replay. All right, well today it's really all about fish. And as it's my mission to get you to eat healthier, I think it's also my mission to get everybody to start eating a little bit more fish. And I feel like the reason why a lot of us don't do it, there's probably many, but the reasons that I hear most often is that you're afraid you're going to overcook it, you're not sure how to prepare it, it makes your house smell a little fishy. So I know there's a lot of reasons why, but we can break those down. And I'm hoping that this recipe will sort of give you more confidence to cook with fish if you're not already doing so. All right, so I want to go over a couple of ingredients and I want to get started cooking so that we can get this finished up. So we are using fish, and I am using, and let me just show you real quick, I'm using some cod fillets. So these are frozen cod fillets. I actually get them delivered from this company called Wild Alaska Company. I love it because they come like every other month. I get a box, and then I always have fish in my freezer that's individually packaged. It makes it so much easier for me. No affiliation with the company, but it just really helps rather than having to run out to a fish market when I really want to have fish. So anyway, I'm using cod. You could use flounder, tilapia. You could use a thinner white fish. You really just want a white fish for this recipe. Salmon's probably not going to work quite as well. All right, I have my burners on. I just want to keep an eye on a couple things. I'm going to move this off. All right, so we're using cod. I'm using 2 fillets. The recipe says to use 4. I'm just using 2 just because I'm using a little bit of a smaller pan on these burners. All right, so let me set that aside. So we have our fish. And basically what we're doing is we're going to be poaching this in like a very, textured tomato broth. So it's not just a liquid. It's going to have the tomato chunks in there as well. And we're poaching that down. And what's nice about that is that when you're using a white fish, because it doesn't have a lot of fat in it, it can dry out. So when you're poaching it in some liquid, that really helps to keep it moist. And it's a little harder than to overcook it. So this is a really good method for you, if you're not really sure about cooking fish. So we're gonna get started, and I'm gonna talk through the ingredients. I went ahead and did a couple of things ahead of time, but I wanna just show you a few so that you feel comfortable with it when you're doing it at home. All right, so what I did earlier is that we're gonna top this with crispy shallots, and I'll show you how I did that. All right, that's a really nice added texture at the end. What we're gonna do though right now is let's get our tomatoes on so they can start cooking down. I just picked these really dark red sort of cherry tomatoes at the market. They looked great, so I grabbed them. We're still getting our sun gold tomatoes from our garden, so I have those sort of mixed in. You don't have to use these small little cherry tomatoes. You can certainly use a bigger tomato. You're just gonna, cut it up and into pieces, and they don't have to even be the same size. So the recipe says about 2 cups. It's give or take. You really kind of want to fill the bottom of the pan because we want this to cook down a little bit. We're going to form a little bit of a, kind of a jammy liquid that our fish is going to poach in. So just enough to sort of fill the bottom of the skillet that you're using. And you're going to want to use a pan that has, like a little bit of a higher edge to it, so there's enough room for the fish to kind of sit into it. So we're going to get that going. One thing, what I just forgot to do, before you add the tomatoes, you're going to add about 2 cloves of minced garlic. So I'm just going to kind of put those right in the middle of the skillet. This recipe is from Alison Roman. She's a New York Times food writer, and I do love a lot of her recipes because they tend to be a little bit simple. She actually sort of crisped up her garlic. She sliced her garlic and crisped it with the shallots. I didn't really prefer that, so I thought it would be better to just sort of brown up a little bit of garlic in the pan before you add the tomatoes. So I just threw that in. So I'm just going to let that now just kind of simmer around with these tomatoes. And you want that liquid to come out of these tomatoes. So if you've got to kind of encourage it along, you can certainly like squish them down a little bit just to make sure some of that liquid's coming out, particularly because we don't want that garlic to burn. So we want a little bit of liquid coming out of those tomatoes pretty quickly. All right, so we have this going. I'm gonna let that cook down. Now let's just talk about the shallots, and I'm gonna try to do them real quickly while this is cooking to show you what I did because it's so easy. So I'm using shallots, and you can get them anywhere, obviously. They're, you know, sort of a cross between an onion and garlic. The thing is with shallots is that they do come in, they really grow in a lot of different sizes, so they can be huge, they can be small. The recipe calls for 3. It doesn't really matter. You just want enough shallots that you're gonna crisp up to use as the topping. So when you cut a shallot, sometimes when you cut the shallot, it's gonna have 2 bulbs inside, and I'll just show you this one. I can feel that it has it, and that's still 1 shallot. So if you're ever using a recipe and it says that it calls for 1 shallot, but when you cut it, it ends up being 2, this is still considered 1 shallot. I just wanted to point that out because I know I was a little confused by that when I first started cooking with shallots. So what I did is I sliced the shallots down. Now the thing with the shallots is you really have to be careful because they will burn your eyes. And I did that and made that mistake the first time I sliced them. I just sliced them with a knife. So this time I just used, and I'll show you real quick, I just used my blade inside of my food processor, and I just ran them through the feed tube, and they sliced up so fast, and no problems with any of that oil sort of like getting into your eyes and burning your eyes. So no crying this morning around the shallots. All right, so this is just gonna keep cooking down. So what I did, here are some sliced shallots. So you want them pretty thinly sliced. So that's why I kind of like doing it in the food processor. You certainly can do this by hand, but it just makes it a lot faster for me. All right, so I have some it's about 1/4 cup of olive oil in this smaller pan. I'm hoping, yeah, I think you can probably see that, but I'll show it to you. All right, so you don't want to like overcrowd, but you can get a decent amount in here. Now, what I love about the shallots is that when they crisp up, they almost become, well, I want to say bacony in a way, but they have that really crisp texture. And if you add just a little salt to it, it really is a nice crunch. And it's a nice little hack for finishing a lot of dishes if you're really looking to get some really good flavor and crunch. So you could do shallots like this, but you could also do, I did red onions, and when I did the red onions, they really looked like bacon once they were crisped up. And you can kind of tell that even with these, they really get brown and crispy. So it's a great little, you know, alternative to using something like bacon. Now, I am cooking in a fair amount of olive oil, but I'll tell you why. Is that because I'm going to use some of the oil when you cook off your shallots. So you're going to do your shallots in 1 skillet. I already just did this step ahead. So I did the shallots in this skillet. I took them out. I left a little bit of the shallot oil in the bottom of the pan. Then then you add your garlic, and then you add your tomatoes. So you're using some of that oil in the sauce to bring some of that shallot flavor even through to the sauce. And then the rest of the oil that's with the shallots, I'll show you if these actually cook through before we finish. But you're going to take the shallots out, put them in a bowl, pour the rest of the oil over it, and just kind of let them sit. I think the recipe says to put them on a paper towel. You could do that, but it's kind of nice to have that little bit of that shallot oil to help as a little finishing on top of the fish. So I think it's better probably just to put them in a bowl and then put that extra oil on top of them and set them aside, which is exactly what I did here, all right? So some of the shallot oil is in with the tomatoes, in with the garlic, and this burner, this smaller burner surface doesn't get quite as hot, so I'm not sure if I'm going to even get these crispy, but I just wanted to show you that step. It literally takes, I think I timed it 8 minutes, depending on how hot you have your oil, to crisp these shallots up. All right, so these tomatoes are really cooking down, and you kind of want them jammy, we need a little broth in there because we need to poach the fish. So I've done this recipe many times, and depending on how juicy your tomatoes are, you may or may not need to add a little bit of water. So my tomatoes aren't quite as juicy, I think, this time. So they're releasing liquid now, which is good, but I think I'm going to need a little bit more. So I'm going to just go ahead and add a little bit of water to the pan, just so that I have a little bit of extra broth in here, and that's fine because there's going to be a lot of flavor going on. The water's going to be fine to just, all right, so let me just add a little bit of that. And then as far as the shallots go, as you're cooking these shallots, just keep an eye on them because they do, once they start to brown, they can kind of go from brown to burnt kind of quickly, so you don't really want to walk away when you're noticing that they're starting to crisp up. Just keep an eye on them. You want them to get pretty brown, and when you take them out of the pan and put them in a bowl, and you're going to put a little bit of that oil on top, they're going to continue to crisp and brown even while they're in the bowl. So you sort of take them off just a little bit before you think they're ready, and then once you let them sit aside, they sort of magically, they just sort of crisp right back up again. All right, so I'm going to let that go. All right, so now we've got the tomatoes and the garlic, and I just added a little bit of water. Now what we're going to use to really give this a really nice umami flavor is we're going to use something that's called fish sauce. All right, and it may seem odd in a way, like it might sound like it's really fishy. It does have a, like a fish, smell to it in a way. It's fermented fish. Very salty, but what it does is it doesn't add a fishy flavor as much as it adds that, and we talk about this a lot, the depth of flavor, like soy sauce would add. It's a little bit of a salty but not too salty background umami kind of flavor. If you don't have fish sauce, that's okay. You could use soy sauce in place. You're just not going to quite get that intense flavor that you would get if you're using fish sauce. And you could also use, and I'm going to try to pronounce it, Worcestershire sauce, because this contains anchovies, so it is sort of like a fish sauce. So most of us have this in our pantry or in our fridge, so you could swap out either one of those. I use fish sauce though a lot in dishes, particularly in tomato sauces, because it does really add a nice richness. This is calling for about a teaspoon, and you don't really need much. I mean, a little bit goes a long way, so a teaspoon really is plenty. All right, so I'm just adding that. Now, when you're crisping up the shallots, what you're going to do is right as towards, you maybe have 30 seconds left if you think you're going to pull them out of the oil. That's when you're going to add just a few shakes of some red pepper, just to give this a little background heat, which is kind of nice. So my shallots aren't really ready, and I'll show them to you if I can get them there. I'm just saying, I think they're going to take a little longer because it's hard to get this. I can't get the heat as high as I want it to go, but they're browning up, so that's good. All right, so they're off to the side. All right, so now I'm just going to add a little pepper, a little ground pepper, and maybe a little more than a little, and then just a little sprinkle of salt. We can always taste later. We just don't want to over salt that now. So I'm going to go ahead and nestle these little cod fillets, and normally there would be 4, but my pan's just a little bit small. So for this, just for the video, so for the demo, so I'm going to put them in. Now they're not going to necessarily come all the way. You're not going to really cover them with this broth, but they're going to come probably at least halfway up. It just depends on how much liquid comes off your tomatoes. So what I'll do is I'm just going to take some of this and I'm just going to cover the top of them with some of the tomatoes, just to give them a little cover. You could salt and pepper your fillets before you put them in. It's not a bad idea. I did not, but you could. All right, so let's just get some of this broth on top. All right, so we're gonna let this in here. Now, what we're gonna do is cover this, all right? So let me just put this off to the side. You have an option. Sometimes we have skillets and we don't have a lid. I know I do that all the time, just because a lot of times when you get a skillet, it doesn't come with a lid. So if you just take your sheet pan, you now have a lid. So if you ever run into that problem, this is your lid. It goes on, it fits almost any pan. I just happen to have one that does. It doesn't go to this skillet, but it fits it. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover it. All right, so we're gonna let this go. Now, when you're cooking this, we don't want this as a rolling boil, because if you have your fish cooking at a really high boil, it's gonna get a little bit tough, and we don't want that. We want a little simmer. So I'm also going to turn this down a little bit, but because this is an electric burner, it's hard to regulate. If you have a gas stove, it'll be much easier, obviously. So I'm going to let this go. I'm going to cover it, and it really is going to depend on the thickness of the fish, how long it takes. If you're using flounder, which is obviously very thin, or tilapia or some other fish, that's thin, it's going to cook in a few minutes. It's not going to take long at all. If you're using something, this was at least an inch thick, I would say, and it's generally the rule of thumb is about 10 minutes per inch thickness of fish. So this may or may not even take that long. What I'm going to do as it's cooking, I'm going to keep just putting some sauce on top of it, and then I might just to kind of I don't know if I have to. I was going to say I might even just flip them over, but I don't think I have to because I think they're going to go ahead and just cook all the way through they're just going to kind of steam. I'm going to try to turn this down. I don't know if you can see this, but see how it's really kind of boiling? That's a little more than you want. So you want to probably have it a little simmering kind of going on there. So there's a little bubbling going on, but not a rolling boil. All right, so let me just put the lid back on. All right, and let me show you real quick. They're starting to brown up a little. You can see when I did this on my regular stove before the class, these literally, honestly, I think it was, 7 minutes and I had them all crisp up. This is just taking a little bit longer, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is. So you're doing it all in one pan. So it's not like you have to do this in a separate pan and then do your fish in a pan. No, you start out doing your shallots in your fish pan. Then you're going to take your shallots out and then you're going to keep some oil in there and then you're going to add everything back in. All right, so let's talk a little bit real quick about fish in general, some nutritional points. If you're not eating fish right now, try to add at least once a week. See if you can find a fish meal. If you like this recipe, great. See if you can find some kind of a fish that you like, and you can start adding that into your diet. The nutritional goals or the recommendations are fairly broad. It's between about 8 ounces of fish per week up to at least 15 ounces of fish per week. If you're following that Mediterranean eating style, 15 ounces is more likely what we're going to recommend, because that's really going to be maybe 4 times a week that you're having fish. So if it's 8 ounces a week, it's probably maybe twice a week. So, but you really want to sort of try to reach that goal. And I think we all know that fish is just super healthy from a heart healthy perspective, but obviously it's a great source of lean protein in our diet. So if that's not something that you're doing currently, that might be something you might want to consider. All right, so this is going. All right, so again, it's boiling a little bit more than I want to. I think I am going to just take, well, they're so delicate. You almost don't want to flip them. I don't feel like I have a spatula, I could just grab it, but I think I'm going to still just let them go because they're really coming together. All righty. And our shallots are as well. So they're starting to brown up. So you can kind of see that they really are taking on a little bit of a brown color. Now they're not quite ready to pull off because that's not close enough. But I think what I'll do is I am going to just give it a shake of some red pepper. So it's about 1/4 teaspoon that we're going to add to the shallots. And the red pepper, you don't need them in the oil very long. It's just you're putting those red pepper flakes in there just to, kind of bloom that flavor a little bit from the red pepper, and we kind of want some of that heat to kind of disperse into the oil. You're kind of adding them, maybe 30 seconds to a minute before you're ready to pull this off. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn this heat off because it'll just kind of continue to kind of cook on the residual heat, and it'll probably get to where we want it to be. All right, so let's take a peek at our fish. And let me just rinse these off real quick. So remember, when you're cooking with fish, if you're using utensils and you're using your utensils with the raw fish, you definitely want to rinse things off if you're going to then go back into the cooked version. All right, this one is done. All right, so let me pull this off because I want to show you how pretty this is. Let me just move all of my things off, and let me just wipe my surface a little bit here. All right, so you're going to want a bowl for this because you want this broth to come with the fish. And I'm going to turn this off again because I'm going to have a lot of residual heat here that this is going to cook through. So again, this probably took 10 minutes. I don't even know if it took that long. Thinner fish is going to cook much quicker, a couple of minutes at the most. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the fish. Well, you know what? Let's do it first. Let's take the broth first. We're going to put some broth down at the bottom. It smells really good, really good. Doesn't have again, pretty simple. This is less than 5 ingredients, or about 5, right? So we're going to put some of your tomato broth on the bottom. And then let's take your fish fillet. And we're going to just nestle that right on top of the sauce. All right. And then I think we'll just add a little more to the top. Now here's where the real magic happens. So this would be great just as is. It's gonna have a nice flavor, and if you need to use a little more salt and pepper, then certainly you can do that. But so here's what we're gonna do. So to finish this off, you have a couple options. One is I'm definitely gonna use some fresh herbs. So I don't know if you can see them, but I have these types of things are always sitting in my windowsill. So if you're not buying fresh herbs every week, please start thinking about doing that. You just buy a bunch every week and keep them around, put them on your windowsill, put them in some water, and then pull them off and put them on everything, because the nutritional value of these herbs are really high, and I don't think we always think about that when we're eating herbs. We kind of just think, oh, they're just for flavor, but no, they're adding some nutritional value. So I have parsley and I have mint, and I'm gonna use both on the top of this. If you like cilantro would also work really well. I think I mentioned before, we're not huge cilantro fans in this family, so I usually end up using parsley instead. So we're just gonna chop up some herbs. And again, I think all of this, when you're using fresh herbs, it just adds such a nice freshness at the end of the dish. So a little sprinkle of the herbs. And then we're gonna take some of these crispy shallots, and we're gonna nestle those right on top. All right. And then what is really nice, again, for freshness and for some tartness, you don't have to, but if you'd like to, we're gonna just finish this with just a wedge of lime, all right? So just cut up a little lime, just a little squeeze of lime over the top, and there you have it, all right? So here's our poached cod in a tomato broth with crispy shallots and with some fresh herbs on top. Super fast. I'm not sure how long that took us, but it was pretty fast, all right? So fish is just one of those, I'll keep this here so you can see it. Fish is just one of those really fast meals. It's like, that's fast food, and it's in its just nature, in its normal state, because fish cooks so quickly. What I love about buying the individually frozen is that you can pull them from the freezer, and in the morning, you can actually take them out of the freezer when you get home from work, if you're going to the office or you're going out to work, and you can get them defrosted pretty quickly. There's many different ways to do that. So I love that you don't even have to remember to defrost them if you have your fish as frozen fish. So anyway, this could be an incredible gateway fish for our gateway recipe for you for fish. If you're not cooking a lot of fish, give it a try. It's pretty foolproof. You just don't want to overcook the fish in a hard boil, kind of get that tomato broth down to more of a little low boil, low simmer kind of thing. All right, so that's your fish meal for the week. We're going to be doing a lot more fish recipes for sure, because this is just something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I do love fish, and I do cook it quite a bit. Next week, I thought it'd be fun to do something with overnight oats. I've been asked, again, I get some questions around breakfast, and we haven't done a whole lot on breakfast, and now that it's fall, and I feel like oatmeal kind of is coming back on the table, whether you're eating it hot or whether you're eating it cold as an overnight version. So we'll just play around with some fall flavors and create some really fun kind of to-go breakfasts that you put them in a jar with a lid and you're out the door, if that's needed for your schedule. All right. Thanks for joining. As always, check us out on Athens Nutrition. And if you do love these videos, please share them. If you can share them with friends and family, that would be great. If we can reach out to others and really kind of get them thinking about cooking a little bit healthier and realizing that it's really not that difficult and that food can taste delicious, I would be thrilled. All right, so listen, you guys have a great day. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.